Je me pose la question, Madame la Présidente, et je pense que la plupart de ceux qui ont servi ce pays comme ministre le savent, c'est le bureau de l'Attorney General et les officiers de l'Attorney General's Office qui travaillent sur des projets de loi. Et c'est sur les recommandations de ces officiers qu'éventuellement, au niveau du Conseil des ministres, on approuve les projets de loi. Alors, je ne comprends pas trop l'argument énoncé par le ministre en ce qui concerne la composition du Conseil. Il a fait référence aux personnes, c'est-à-dire des officiers qui étaient sur ce Conseil et qui étaient des officiers du ministère. Il a fait comprendre que c'était des officiers qui n'étaient pas employés à plein temps, mais des officiers qui étaient en un sessional, si je ne me trompe pas. Oui, c'est ce qu'il avait dit. Mais madame, je me suis renseigné au fait, et je comprends que there is no post as such in the ministry to be able to recruit an optician. Whereas, Madam Speaker, they have been there, I understand, those persons, for the past 25 years, which means that they may not be public officers, but they have been providing service to the ministry for the past 25 years, Madam. Now, having said that, Madam Speaker, I believe the Honourable Minister today had two possibilities. One, if it is confirmed what he has said in this House, the first one was to completely scrap the existing legislation and come up with a new legislation. Or, if, as he said, it was illegal, il y a eu des mal-donnes au niveau du Conseil, he should have made a statement to the police from the very day he was made aware of this situation, and not come today, like I said, to this House with an amendment to the bill and make gratuitous allegation, Madam Speaker. Having said that, Madam Speaker, let me say a few things. There are things I welcome in this piece of legislation. For example, to formally bring orthoptist under the regulatory umbrella of the Optical Council. Because for too long, Madam Speaker, there has been ambiguity regarding their status, and this bill, Madam Speaker, seeks to correct that. However, Madam Speaker, while the intent of this bill may be noble, the mechanisms proposed raise serious questions regarding patient safety, professional autonomy, and the governance of the Council itself, Madam Speaker. And today, Madam Speaker, what we see in this piece of legislation was what was criticized when that act was brought into this House in 2021. Et permettez-moi, Madame la Présidente, pour étayer ce que je suis en train de dire, de me référer à l'intervention de l'honorable Richard Duval à l'époque. Et je cite, « Je vois que le ministre va accentuer la présence des fonctionnaires sur ce conseil. » Fin de citation. Et j'espère, il n'est pas là aujourd'hui, que l'honorable Richard Duval n'y verra pas une entrave à l'indépendance de cette institution quand il avait affirmé à l'époque. Et je cite, « Et si on y ajoute à cette liste le représentant du bureau du Premier ministre, le représentant de l'Attorney General's Office, le ministre aura sous son contrôle 7 membres de ce conseil, ce qui représente presque la moitié de l'Optical Council. De ce fait, la question de l'indépendance de tel conseil se pose, et je reviendrai un peu plus tard, Madame la Présidente, à cet argument qui avait été énoncé à l'époque. Madam Speaker, let me address certain specific provisions of this bill, and I hope I will have the full attention of the Minister for what I'm going to say. Madam Speaker, as leader of the opposition, my duty is to scrutinize these provisions to ensure that the people of this country are not shortchanged in the name of administrative conditions. And in doing so, Madam Speaker, I have measured this bill against international best practice, specifically the regulatory frameworks of the UK and Australia, both recognized globally for robust health profession regulation. And, Madam Speaker, the comparison reveals significant departures from international standard. And I shall address 6 critical areas of concern. Firstly, patient safety and the abolition of the pre-registration examination. As Speaker, let me draw the attention of the House to the explanatory memorandum and also to clause 11 of the bill, which both deals with pre-registration, where it is explicitly stated that the object of this bill is to abolish the pre-registration examination for opticians. And this is not a minor administrative tweak, Madam Speaker. This is the removal of a critical safeguard. Under the 2021 Act, practitioners were required, Madam Speaker, to hold an approved qualification and pass a pre-registration examination, and this served as a final regulatory gatekeeping mechanism. It verified professional competency beyond paper qualification and ensured that graduates, Madam Speaker, met local clinical standards. Now, this House, Madam Speaker, needs to be informed what safeguards will replace this examination to ensure that practitioners entering the profession meet the required competency standards to protect the Mauritian public. We must also remember that optometry education standards vary significantly across countries. For example, Madam Speaker, how will the Council verify that foreign-trained practitioners meet local clinical standards without a pre-registration examination, Madam Speaker? Et cette nécessité, Madame la Présidente, est fondamentale. Moi-même, en tant qu'ingénieur de profession, je suis passé par là. J'ai dû faire 2 années d'apprentissage et passer des examens avant de pouvoir exercer comme un ingénieur professionnel. Alors là, on est en train d'abolir that pre-registration, Madam Speaker. Now, let us have a look at international practice, Madam Speaker. For example, in Australia, overseas trained optometrists must pass the competency in optometry examination, a very rigorous assessment comprising both written and clinical components, administered by the Optometric Council of Australia and New Zealand before they can be granted a general registration. In the UK, the General Optical Council maintains strict accreditation standards for qualification and may require additional training or assessment for overseas applicants. The WHO, in its 2024 Guidance on Health Practitioner Regulation, explicitly identifies defining minimum levels for competence as a core regulatory function for patient safety. And what are we doing here in Mauritius? We are being asked to abolish this safeguard without a structured replacement. Is the Minister, Madam Speaker, aware that most international regulatory bodies retain mandatory competency assessment prior to registration? Then again, if so, why is Mauritius moving in the opposite direction? And if you'll allow me, I'll put that question: does government has a sinister motive in abolishing the pre-registration examination for opticians? Madam Speaker, by removing this examination, we are prioritizing the speed of registration over the safety of the patient. This House, Madam Speaker, seeks assurance that alternative, robust competency assessment, whether a supervised internship, a clinical portfolio, or a modified examination, will be put in place. Otherwise, Madam Speaker, we risk diluting the standards of eye care in our country. Madam Speaker, let me dwell now on an important clause of the bill, which I raised earlier and which concerns the governance and independence of the regulator, which to me is fundamental to this piece of legislation. Madam Speaker, let me refer to Clause 7, which restructures the Optical Council. As it is said in the explanatory memorandum, and the Minister explained to us, that this specific clause is to address an anomaly with regard to public sector representation. Yet, Madam Speaker, the proposed composition under the Clause 7.1 shows a fundamental shift in the balance. Now, with only 6 elected members from the profession and 7 ex officio or appointed members, including representatives from the Ministry of Health, the Prime Minister's Office, the Attorney General's Office, the Ministry of Finance, and 2 persons appointed by the Honorable Minister. Madam Speaker, may we know from the Minister as to why the number of professional members from the optical sector is being reduced, and how does government intend to preserve the principle of professional self-regulation? Et je retourne à ce que l'honorable ministre Richard Duval avait dénoncé avec beaucoup de verve il y a quelques années de cela, spécifiquement concernant ce conseil, Madame la Présidente. Now, Madam Speaker, let me compare this with international models, and I'll make reference again to UK and Australia. In the United Kingdom, Madam Speaker, the General Optical Council comprises 6 registrant members, that is, optometrists and dispensing opticians. who are elected by their peers, and 6 lay members, including an independently appointed chair. This ensures, Madam Speaker, a professional parity while safeguarding public interest through independent oversight. In Australia, the Optometry Board operates under the National Registration and Accreditation Scheme with a structured balance of practitioners and community members appointed via a transparent, merit-based process. Crucially, Madam Speaker, the board enjoys statutory independence. Ministerial direction is limited only to broad policy, not individual regulatory decisions. What we see here under this bill, elected professionals are outnumbered. The addition of members appointed directly by the minister will give executive significant sway over regulatory outcomes. What guarantee, if I may ask the minister, will he give to this House that these appointments will not, these appointment powers will not be used to influence regulatory decisions affecting the optical profession? Madam Speaker, the WHO guidance on this issue is clear. Effective regulation requires assurance of independence in the governance and accountability of professional regulators to maintain public confidence. And again, with regard to that, this piece of legislation goes in the opposite direction. Now, another issue, Madam Speaker, is that of conflict of interest and the role of ophthalmologists. Madam Speaker, Clause 7.1 grants a permanent seat to the consultant in charge of the Subramania Bharati Eye Hospital. Now, while we respect the expertise of ophthalmologists, how does granting a permanent seat to a consultant ophthalmologist not constitute a conflict of interest, given that ophthalmology and optometry have overlapping scopes of practice, allowing one profession to directly participate in regulating another raises concern regarding professional independence and bias in disciplinary matters. Furthermore, is the minister aware that ophthalmologists in Mauritius may operate optical retail businesses without being registered under the Optical Council? What measures does this bill, Madam Speaker, introduce to address this regulatory gap and prevent unfair competition? Will the government consider introducing, Madam Speaker, clear statutory rules regarding the ownership of optical shops to ensure that dispensing activities are properly supervised by registered professionals? We cannot have a situation where one group is strictly regulated while another operates outside the regulatory framework. Madam Speaker, I wish to draw the attention of the House to Clause 3, which deletes the definition of practice of optometry from the Principal Act. How will the removal of this statutory definition not create legal ambiguity regarding who is authorized to perform optometric procedures? Legal definitions, Madam Speaker, establish the boundaries of professional practice. Removing this definition will definitely create uncertainty regarding what activities constitute optometry and how enforcement should occur. Without a clear legal definition, Madam Speaker, how does the government intend to prosecute individuals or companies engaged in the illegal practice of optometry? Again, I will refer the House to international practice. In the United Kingdom, the Opticians Act of 1989 contains precise statutory definition of regulated activities, that is, sight testing, contact lens fitting, sale of optical appliances, therefore enabling clear prosecution of illegal practice. In Australia, the national law provides an explicit framework for defining the practice of the profession, supported by board-endorsed scope of practice statements. Furthermore, Madam Speaker, merging the definition of optician in this bill risks blurring the distinction between clinical practitioners and retail optical operators, thereby weakening professional enforcement. And this leads me to a broader concern, Madam Speaker. Let me ask this to the Minister, whether his ministry has conducted an assessment of the number of companies currently operating in Mauritius in breach of the Optical Council Act of 2021. If this is the case, may I ask him to table a report before this House? Can the Honourable Minister reassure the House that this amendment bill is not designed directly or indirectly to regularize or protect companies that have been operating illegally in this country? The timing of this piece of legislation raises legitimate concerns and questions, Madam Speaker. If we are removing competency assessment and blurring professional definitions, who truly benefits? What specific enforcement mechanisms does this bill introduce to strengthen the Council's ability to prosecute illegal optical practice? Madam Speaker, in the UK, optical businesses must be enrolled with the General Optical Council and comply with published standards. In Australia, business registration is separate from practitioner registration with clear corporate governance requirements. Madam Speaker, we cannot support reforms that appear to lower barriers for some while raising burdens for registered and compliant practitioners. Madam Speaker, given the profound changes proposed, allow me to question the Minister on whether the optical, he said that, but I'm saying formally, consulted the Optical Council, whether they were formally consulted prior to the drafting of this amendment bill. If this is the case, as he said, will he table the Council written response before the House? Were registered optometrists and dispensing opticians given a formal opportunity to submit representation before finalizing this piece of legislation? Regulatory reform, Madam Speaker, requires trust and collaboration. Is this the case with this piece of legislation? WHO emphasizes that transparent processes for standard setting and appointment are essential for regulatory legitimacy. Rushing this legislation without meaningful engagement, Madam Speaker, is, in my humble opinion, taking risk of creating a regulatory framework that lacks professional buy-in and public confidence. Madame la Présidente, en guise de conclusion. C'est vrai, quand j'ai regardé le projet de loi, c'est un projet de loi qui va éventuellement apporter une certaine dose de clarification à la profession, qui est une bonne chose pour les citoyens de ce pays, mais en contrepartie, il y a beaucoup de questions à être répondues par le ministre afin de rassurer cette population. Je vous remercie, Madame la Présidente.
Merci beaucoup. Oui, maintenant, j'ai le docteur Omir.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is the second time I'm having the opportunity to give my opinion and views on the optical bill, which was firstly presented to this House in 2021. I've listened carefully to the Leader of the Opposition, and I have to say to him, if today the Minister has come to have to bring certain amendments to the optical bill, not notwithstanding that we all agree to everything, it is exactly because of the flaws and the perception that has been in that bill when it was enacted that favors a few. And secondly, when he talks about that we do not have any public officer, namely optician, working on contractual agreement in the public hospital, but then he says himself we should not have the consultant ophthalmologist sitting on the board. He's contradicting himself. You either want one or not, but I fully support that we do need a specialist in the field of ocular vision, namely ophthalmologists, to sit around with opticians to bring the best care standard of eyesight in this country. Madam Speaker, I have no doubt that the Honourable Minister, when he is bringing amendment to this bill, his main objectives and concerns are strengthen the regulation of optical profession and at the same time enhance the quality of eye care services in this country. Obviously, amendments are brought because obviously he had fought and seen that there are gaps and shortcomings in the previous bill. And his aim must now be seen in the amendment that he's bringing as to bring and improve registration, licensing procedures, and clarifying the scope of the practice. All changes that are to be brought must be seen to protect the public at large. These are the main people who are concerned, not us lawmakers or whatever we call ourselves, but it is the public sitting outside there should be seen to protect, to be protected and have the best benefits of these amendments. And also the profession, a profession which will be professionally accountable, but also having a forward-working optical practice. Madam Speaker, for discussion's sake, it is extremely important that the House and the public at large who are listening to us understand the purview of this bill and who are those who will be directly involved in the delivery of care of eyesight in this country, talking widely optical practice. We're talking about optometrists. We have 4 categories: optometrists, dispensing optician, opticien lunetier, and the orthoptist. For those who here maybe find all these terms confusing, optometrists sell glasses, contact lenses, consult you, can prescribe glasses, but cannot prescribe medications. It's very important. And this is why I will say to the Honourable Leader of Opposition, we need to have a consultant ophthalmologist on the Council. They are allowed to prescribe. Dispensing optician, they only sell glasses and fit contact lenses. They are not supposed to do consultation unless they have acquired bachelor degrees afterwards that allow them to do that. Le opticien lunetier, lui, c'est quelqu'un qui s'est gradué en France et c'est un concept très strict. Same are the optometrists, but are not allowed to look after those below the age of 16. Oh. And, yes. And the orthoptists. The orthoptists, the main scope of work is to investigate, diagnose those who have broad eye movement disorder, binocular vision, strabismus like myself. Some people always call me Tiakarige Jirian Kote, but are not allowed to sell glasses. So we need good optometrists in this country. Okay. Madam Speaker, having said so, I have gone very in depth to the bill And I will broadly comment on three aspects. However, I have to say that the three aspects I'm going to comment does not mean that I'm going against the intentions and the concept that have been elicited in the bill by the Honourable Minister, but only to say that my concerns are as they would be, and I'm sure the Honourable Minister, during his summing up, will be able to reassure us, and knowing him very well, we had a long talk yesterday as well, I'm sure he will make amends if he feels deemed necessary. I will comment mainly on the abolition of pre-registration examination for those opticians and orthoptists, about the deleting the definition of the practice of optometry, and thirdly, if time allows, composition of the council. I have to say that I had a few meetings with representatives of the optical association of this country and the optical council. I've listened to their views, not saying that all of them, what they said, were determinant in what I'm going to say, but I had a listening ear to them. And I'm sure the Honourable Minister has done the same as I did. I will now comment on the abolition of pre-registration exams, likewise as I did in 2021. At the time, the arguments was we will have selective exemption of certain opticians, optometrists, or dispensary opticians that come from United Kingdom. And I was totally against in my speech that we cannot have selective exemption. We either need to have exams for all, or we don't do the exams. Unfortunately, or fortunately, the Minister has come and said today in this bill that he is not favorable that we continue with the exams and is therefore abolishing it. So he has gone from one extreme to the other. My question is, we should not be taking the pre-registration exam very lightly, because such a system has proven and delivered its promise. In May 1921, exams were carried by the Optical Council, and it showed that the pass rate was only 15%. They changed it. They changed it to have foreign examiners, and subsequently, when the content of the examination papers were produced, the pass rate has improved to 40%. The question that I ask myself, and we should ask ourselves, why abolishing a process that are standard practice in various parts of the world, including United Kingdom, India, or other parts in Europe, developing countries? We are abolishing a process, and whether we like it or not, exams have ensured an unbiased evaluation of all concerned in the field of optometry, irrespective whether some like it or not. Exams are objective assessment. It is unbiased, it is objective. For the four categories I have mentioned, you have different set of papers for them, they have different pass mark, and also the questions that have been put in the Optical Council exam are not theoretical, they are all practical. And finally, the number of times you can take the exam, even you fail 10 times, you can still take it. There is what we call an endless number of attempts. I am of the opinion, Madam Speaker, that we need to have benchmark standards in the practice of eye care, since it is a very, very delicate practice. If you look here, I just had a count today, 30% of us sitting here wear glasses. This is daily. 40% of the population have non-communicable diseases. Out of it, diabetes, nearly 400,000 people, pre-diabetic or diabetic who have eyesight issues. This is serious. We're talking of a profession that we should not take lightly, whatever amendments we will bring. Knowing quite well that we have optometrists and opticians that come from different parts of the world and institutions, we have to be extremely careful as to who are those who are going to give a license to practice. Otherwise, because the practice that have acceptable standards, who are recognized, otherwise we will be opening a can of worms. And I mean it. We will be opening a can of worms because the backdoor entry will be just wide open. When it comes to foreign opticians, I fully agree we can't just subject them to examination. We will discourage people to come. We have the way of where council have temporary registration, where they won't need exams. Some people have said exams are biased. Exams are truly biased, Madam Speaker. You know what they are biased? They are biased against those who do not study, those who don't come to the scratch, those who do not have the level of expertise, those who have not made it fully by attending their courses. Exams are biased against these people. Otherwise, exams have proven that it will show exactly who those who are competent, efficient, highly professional, and deliver the best care of service. Madam Speaker, professional expertise is at the core of any regulation and accreditation. And if exams, which I take myself and engage myself personally, which I fully support, is to be removed, I hope that the Minister of Health must reassure the population at large and the public of a system that would be put in place that has strict educational accreditation validated by the local and foreign authorities, evidence of accredited university training by those who are applying to be registered, where the prospective optician has been doing his training, and thirdly, licensing must be linked to recognized educational authorities. In my opinion, Madam Speaker, competency assessment, be it through existing exams or any other mechanism which the Honourable Minister may deem fit, and surely he has that in mind, must ensure that only those with the highest standards of practice, competence, professional integrity, based on evidence medical practice, these are the ones that should be recognized by the Council. For example, the developing world also has noted that they need to come with a more valid form of assessment, and they came with a scheme. These amendments must not be seen to be as a backdoor entry for those who knowingly well cannot take exams in view of their limited competency to have an easy registration pathway to the Council. And I would just complete my arguments, and I've noted at section 17, subsection 2D, where the practitioner will process such an interview as conducted by the Council. I would have been very comforted by the bill if there were more details on who would conduct the interview, whether it would be local practitioners, foreign practitioners, whether it would be members of the Council that would be co-opted to have any expertise in optometry or related to the field, and that would surely be an element of subjective assessment, and we have to be extremely careful. Any subjective assessment will bring an element of bias and can be contested by anybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. Very interesting. Yes, Mr. Bichuk.
Merci Madame la Présidente. Madame la Présidente, en ce début de soirée, nous débattons des amendements à l'Optical Council Act de 2021. Mon ami, collègue du Parlement, a largement élaboré, d'ailleurs de par son métier, l'aspect vraiment médical du dossier. Mais néanmoins, moi je vais élaborer parce que sur ce marché que représente l'optique, le marché de l'optique, madame, rightly so, Honorable has pointed it out, it concerns 40% of Mauritians. Mais cependant, madame, ce marché est dominé par la mainmise atomisante de l'Optical Council. Si je dois résumer ce marché, je me réfère à l'adage en créole qui dit « Métlicien veille saucisse ». Je vais m'expliquer, madame. Qui dit marché dit revenu. Qui dit revenu dit intérêts commerciaux. Qui dit intérêts commerciaux dit profit. Et lorsque ces acteurs, par là même, les bénéficiaires de ces intérêts commerciaux, sont chargés de réguler la pratique du métier, et par ricochet le marché lui-même, qu'avons-nous? Une situation ubuesque, résumant l'adage lycien V. Ceci. La loi de 2021, Madame la Présidente, a donné lieu à une cartélisation sidérante, cadenassant, verrouillant, à double, triple, quadruple tour, l'accès au marché aux nouveaux opérateurs, et cela au profit des opérateurs existants. Nous avons vu dans le discours du ministre de la Santé comment, en l'absence des représentants légitimes de l'État, l'Optical Council a été accaparé par des opérateurs sans scrupules. Figurez-vous, le registrar de l'Optical Council est lui-même un opérateur du marché de l'optique. N'est-ce pas un cas flagrant de conflit d'intérêts? Je félicite le ministre de la Santé d'être aujourd'hui vent debout contre toutes les lobbies mercantilistes en faveur du maintien du statu quo. Madame la Présidente, l'opposition et les opposants aux amendements ciblent l'élimination de l'examen qui mène à l'enregistrement des opticiens, des ophtalmologues, des opticiens lunetiers, etc. Eh bien, Madame la Présidente, sachez que ces examens, justement, c'est le kalachnikov entre les mains des accapareurs du Conseil qui s'en sert pour éliminer de manière chirurgicale la compétition dans le marché. Je m'explique. Comment ces examens sont-ils organisés? Par le MES. Sur la recommandation de qui? L'Optical Council. Qui sont les examinateurs? Ils sont choisis selon une liste de 3 ou 4 personnes soumises par qui? L'Optical Council. D'accord? Qui rédige le papier d'examen? Ces mêmes personnes inféodées à l'Optical Council. Qui corrige ces papiers d'examen et note les candidats? Ces mêmes personnes. Résultat. En juin 2024, seuls 9 candidats sur 22 ont pu passer les examens. En novembre 2024, seuls 7 sur 29. C'est une aberration, Madame la Présidente. Toujours, au sujet des examens, la loi stipule que les examens doivent avoir lieu tous les ans. Quand est-ce que les derniers examens ont-ils eu lieu? En novembre 2024. Il y a plus d'1 an et demi. Et imaginez-vous, que s'est-il déroulé depuis? 1. Beaucoup de magasins de l'optique, notamment les petits, ont fermé. Parce qu'en l'absence d'opticiens, ils ne peuvent opérer. 2. Les professionnels étrangers en quête d'une occupation permit, ils obtiennent d'abord un titre de séjour temporaire d'1 an, en attendant les examens, eh bien, ils sont éliminés, ils sont contraints de rentrer dans leur pays, parce que ça fait plus d'1 an, il n'y a pas eu d'examen. Ça profite à qui? Les opérateurs existants. Et ça pénalise qui? Les nouveaux intrants. C'est de la persécution professionnelle. La perversion la plus nauséabonde, Madame la Présidente. L'Optical Council profite de cette situation pour outrepasser son mandat, pour aller rencontrer des entités, notamment étatiques, le ministère de la Sécurité sociale, la SICOM, la NIC, pour faire quoi? Pour faire éliminer les prestataires qui s'inscrivent auprès de ces instances. C'est de l'élimination commerciale de prestataires. J'ai devant moi, Madame, une lettre datant du 26 mars 2025 émanant du ministère de la Sécurité sociale. Je vais lire les grandes lignes. The ministry, in collaboration with the Optical Council of Mauritius. D'accord? Entre autres, qu'est-ce qu'ils ont fait? Ils sont allés rencontrer les officiers du ministère de la Sécurité sociale sans que ça soit dans leur mandat. Et par la suite, quel a été le résultat? Thus, you are being deregistered from the ministry's list of suppliers of spectacles with immediate effect. Des opérateurs qui s'inscrivent auprès du ministère de la Sécurité sociale bénéficient d'un grant de 5 000 roupies pour, on va dire, supply des lunettes auprès des personnes les plus vulnérables. On a outrepassé ce mandat pour aller éliminer la compétition. Il a fallu une mise en demeure et l'avis légal du State Law Office pour qu'au bout de 2 mois, cette entreprise, un nouvel entrant sur le marché, soit réinscrit dans le registre des prestataires du ministère de la Sécurité sociale. Voilà comment opère cette mafia. Pour terminer, Madame la Présidente, on parle de ce fameux enregistrement des professionnels. Mais il faut voir la bonne foi du législateur, qu'il dit qu'il a mis en place un conseil et ce conseil est chargé de mettre en place un mécanisme. Justement, ce n'est pas un système où on va enregistrer qui l'on veut ou à tour de bras. Bien sûr, il y aura un examen de chaque dossier par des professionnels. Mais en ce qu'il s'agit de ce fameux enregistrement, Madame la Présidente, I can tell it without fear of favor. Le cas de ce candidat, c'est une aberration. Ce candidat remue ciel et terre pour avoir un enregistrement auprès du Conseil, Optical Council. Cette personne est titulaire d'une baccalauréat in optométrie. Le terme baccalauréat en soi est an undergraduate degree, une licence. They use alternative terms, either baccalaureate degree or bachelor's degree. En raison de ce changement d'appellation, en fonction des pays, des universités, c'est quelque chose que tout à fait praticable. Ce candidat a soumis des documentations émanant du World Council of Optometry, du Botswana Optometry Association en Afrique, de l'Indian Optometric Association India, du Maha Optometry Association Mumbai. Toutes ces documentations pour soutenir qu'il est titulaire d'un undergraduate degree, une licence en optométrie. En dépit de cela, madame, en dépit de cela, il a été éliminé. Son enregistrement n'a pas eu lieu. Pourquoi? Parce que le Conseil se cache derrière le Schedule 3, Section 18.2 of the Optical Act, whereby acceptable qualifications of bachelor's degree in optometry, ophthalmic optometry. But this baccalaureate in optometry is an undergraduate degree in optometry. Voilà comment les personnes de mauvaise foi ont tué, anéanti les candidats. Et je pose la question autrement, madame. Nous, au sein de ce gouvernement et dans ce pays, nous sommes tous d'accord qu'il faut attirer les meilleurs talents étrangers pour venir travailler, pour rehausser le niveau de service, apporter leur expertise. Mais je pose une simple question à cette chambre. Comment convaincre un Anglais, un Indien, un Américain, un Français, ayant plus de 20 ans d'expérience et en étant inscrit auprès de l'instance suprême dans son pays d'origine, de venir travailler à l'île Maurice, on lui demande, tu sais, il faut que tu passes l'examen de l'Optical Council. C'est une aberration, madame. On ne pourra pas le faire. La raison, le résultat, c'est qu'aujourd'hui, ceux qui sont là depuis longtemps tiennent des commerces dans les grands centres commerciaux, sur les axes, ils ont pignon sur rue, sur les axes principaux du pays. Et les nouveaux entrants, ils ont du mal à trouver de la main-d'œuvre. Tout au long, la rhétorique de mon discours, c'est pour vous démontrer, madame, comment l'Optical Council a usé de son pouvoir pour éliminer la compétition. Je vais terminer, madame. La compétition, elle est importante. Il est crucial de démocratiser l'accès à ce métier. Je prends l'exemple de mes verres à moi. Ça m'a coûté 12 000 roupies, les verres anti-reflets, etc., etc. Le même verre, madame, je l'ai acheté dans un petit magasin d'un nouvel entrant sur le marché. Les mêmes verres, quasiment gamme moyenne, ça vous coûte entre 35 000 et 45 000 dans un magasin qui est là depuis longtemps et qui est parenté ou a des contacts au sein de l'Optical Council. Ce bill va permettre, madame, l'épanouissement des nouveaux entrants au sein de ce marché, de décadenasser, déverrouiller, de décadenasser, de déverrouiller l'accès au marché et offrir aux Mauriciens des lunettes de qualité inscrites par des professionnels à des prix abordables. This is why, Madam Speaker, I'm here to commend the bill to the House. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Merci. Je remercie tous ceux qui font un effort pour que le public comprenne bien les enjeux. Madame Babouram.
Madam Speaker, before I proceed with the substance of my contribution, I wish to extend my sincerest and most heartfelt commendation to the Honorable Minister Bichu, beside whom I have the privilege now to humbly serve at the Ministry of Health and Wellness, for his extraordinary dedication, tireless effort, and sheer commitment in bringing this bill before this House. This is not a simple piece of legislation. It touches upon the livelihoods of dozens of professionals, the health outcomes of hundreds of thousands of Mauritians, and the integrity of an industry that has grown considerably over the years. Madam Speaker, let me paint a picture of where we stand today. The Optical Council today comprises around 106 registered professionals, both Mauritians and expats, who are registered as optometrists, opticiens lunetiers, and dispensing opticians, but there are no registered orthoptists. This is our first reason for this bill, to be able to register orthoptists when they become available in the country. Unlike optometrists, orthoptists, as has been thoroughly explained by Honorable Omir, are specialized in binocular vision anomalies and other complex conditions that affect how the eyes work together. They provide the appropriate therapy in each case. There are now many foreigners in the optical industry, and they are trained in various countries. This further explains the importance of a proper optical bill. Now, coming to our local graduates and professionals, previously they had to undergo a professional exam before being registered. However, not many could clear the exam because of a lack of transparency, information, and proper training. The Optical Council Amendment Bill will recognize our young professionals and register them in due course if they fulfill all the required criteria. The Honorable Minister of Health and Wellness has already pointed out the many flaws in the existing Act. I will not, therefore, indulge into this again. Madam Speaker, the industry is a flourishing one, and that is why rigorous checks and proper scrutiny into the profession is needed. There was a time when ophthalmologists, alongside 2 or 3 opticians, used to recruit opticians and dispensing opticians in the eye hospital. We now have optometrists who are qualified to diagnose different eye pathologies using certain equipment and ophthalmic drops and refer to eye specialists whenever needed. The same has been mentioned in the bill. This explains the need for a proper bill and regulations in order to monitor our optical professionals and avoid cases of malpractice. The study of optometry is not currently available in Mauritius. Therefore, our students travel abroad to pursue their studies. When they choose to return back to Mauritius, they have a legitimate expectation to be recognized as professionals and serve this country, their country. In this respect, this bill aims to make it easier for our young professionals to contribute massively to the welfare of the society. Madam Speaker, with a growing and aging population of Mauritius, there is a need for optometrists, especially in our 5 regional hospitals. We currently only have part-time optometrists serving in the public sector. This explains the long waiting list, understaffed facilities, and preventable suffering. It has been noted that our local professionals are not quite interested in working full-time in hospitals. It would then be of utmost importance to recruit optometrists from abroad. Apart from that, with the new bill and newly registered optometrists, there is a scope that our locals would be willing to work in the 5 regional hospitals in order to ensure the continuity of care. I've spoken about our hospitals being greatly understaffed, and I think we need to ponder on this option. Both our hospitals and that of Rodrigues cater for the maximum number of patients needing glasses. This government has worked towards a proper regulation of the optical body that this bill will attain. Our patients waiting for glasses in hospitals will find their needs satisfied in due course, thus reducing the load on our ophthalmologists, allowing them to focus on more complex eye care such as surgeries and aftercare. Optometrists are primary eye care providers. They are known for dispensing glasses and helping patients see better, but little do patients know that optometrists can diagnose various eye pathologies on the very first visit. Some systemic diseases are seen through eye pathologies, and we take the example of diabetic retinopathy that is associated with diabetes mellitus. For instance, many children do not realize that they have a decreased vision. They think it's normal to see poorly. However, when the child is brought in for a regular eye exam, starting from as young as 5 years, it can help in detection of many vision anomalies. A well-regulated, well-staffed optical profession, which is precisely what this bill moves us towards, is a prerequisite for ensuring that our children's vision needs are identified and addressed early. Under the current legislation, it has come to our attention that some professionals with appropriate qualifications have been denied registration for as far as 10 years. And when asked for a reason, no transparency, no apparent reason were forthcoming. Whereas this government has made sure that this bill aims for transparency at its core importance. Our aim is to cater for our local professionals and recognize their contribution to society. The COVID pandemic has taught us the importance of relying on local resources. Now, with the crisis in the Middle East, we will definitely need the help of all of our professionals. This bill facilitates and encourages our professionals in the diaspora to come and serve the country. Zealous in our commitment to progress, this government has shown the vision, the will, and the determination to modernize our institutions and place the welfare of our people at the very heart of its action. At the core of this bill lies fairness, transparency, and the recognition of merit, ensuring that no qualified Mauritian is left behind. Harnessing the potential of our professionals, both local and abroad, we are determined to build a stronger, more self-reliant healthcare system. Empowering our youth and restoring confidence in our institutions, this reform paves the way for a brighter and more inclusive future. Every citizen stands to benefit from a system that upholds quality, accountability, and equal opportunity. Rooted in unity, guided by purpose, we must continue working together to strengthen our nation and uplift our people. As we move forward, let us do so with pride and determination, shaping a Mauritius that reflects the excellence, resilience, and dignity of its people. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much. Thank you for respecting the time. Yes, Dr. Boulel.
Madam Speaker, I feel like saying only fools rush in where angels fear to tread. And I must say, if today the Honourable Minister has stood up and convincingly talk of the merits of this legislation, it is precisely to correct not only an anomaly, but a bill which should not have been introduced in the first place. I'm not going to say how controversial it is, but the minister is right. He's been decisive and incisive to bring the necessary amendments. And he deserves our congratulations because time is of an essence. And it is the signals which we send to the public which is very relevant. The signals which we send to the public which are relevant. I made it a point to listen to speeches delivered by our friends. And I must say, some of the arguments put forward by the leader of the opposition are worth listening to, notwithstanding what our good friend, our fellow from Dublin had said, the good Dr. Omir, but will come to the harsh realities. And I listened to the arguments put forward by our good friend who has spoken very eloquently. And he had put across arguments which cannot be rebutted. And I say, hats off to you, sir. And of course, as to the Honourable Lady, she had lived up to expectation. But let me say what is the naked truth. Our friend, the minister, had lent his ears to those who had been complaining. And there was a lot of hue and cry from professionals who have been denied the legitimate rights to work as professionals. And this in itself is tantamount to violation by an optical council, which is not legitimate. It may have the legacy, but it is not legitimate. And it has operated as a closed shop. If we're a government which is responsible, we have to speak up and be heard. And we cannot tolerate an institution to operate simply because it has a legacy, but to operate in all illegitimacy. As a responsible government, we have to act and act without fear or prejudice, because this is the mandate that we have. The minister is right to say the buck stops here. And we have to refer to Section 18(3)(b) of the current Act, as has been highlighted by our distinguished friend, which provides that examination for registration of opticians shall be held once a year. But since the bill was proclaimed, how many times have exams been held? And whose detriment And who has hidden behind the MES? MES has simply acted as a facade. And who prepared the exam papers?
That's a question.
Who prepared the exam papers? It is not because they've invited a few foreign examiners that the job is done. The paper was set deliberately to undermine the process of democracy. And we cannot allow democratic values to be violated. And the minister's right to come and say, we are going to widen the circle of opportunities, create the opportunities for those who are eligible, who have a legitimate right, who had spent time overseas studying. Not everybody had the means to go and study in Dublin or France, but some make the sacrifices and they go to reputed institutions in India or elsewhere. And when they come back, should they be discriminated upon and denied the legitimate rights? What else have we not been told? That there's no provision for definition of optometrists. But when we look at the provision of legislation, it's there, looking at us, glaring, obvious. And yet, when I had a letter from the acting chairperson of the Optical Council, she said there's no provision. But provisions is there. When we look at the law, the definition,
Section 3.
Section 3, you said it, 3G. Optometrist means a person who evaluates visual acuity and prescribes, fits and supplies optical appliances for remedial purposes. Uses such equipment and such medication as miotic, cycloplegics, etc., as may be necessary for remedial purposes. And when we look at the council, madam, there's legitimate provision for the minister not only to have his leeway, certainly he's not going to have his leeway, but who are those appointed by government? Or am I to understand that the representative of Prime Minister's office will bend backwards to the whim and caprices of those who think they can exercise undue influence? Or the representative from the Attorney General's office? And who are the two members who are going to be appointed by the minister? Any Tom, Dick, and Harry? We are a government which has the responsibility to act, and to act without fear or prejudice. When you're in government, you decide and you govern not in poetry but in prose. That's why we are here. Madam Speaker, let me say, and I say in prose, of course. I've talked of membership and I've talked of transparency. But there have been sound arguments also put forward. And I do say, because there are provisions for regulations. Supervising internship, we are not against. This is what regulations are here for. What stops us to say that in the distant future, we may entertain the proposal made by our good friend, Dr. Omia? Why not? The law is an ass, but we have to amend. We have to regulate. Otherwise, there's no point in us sitting here, madam, if we're not going to amend. I will also close free we have referred to. Let me also make it quite clear in relation to who is an orthoptist. Optometrist, we know what the person does. An orthoptist has to have basic knowledge in brain surgery, in brain anatomy. He has to have basic knowledge. You know, Prime Minister would say, the best way to remember the 12 nerves, you know what it is? I won't say it. You know, he's laughing. But,
We don't know.
no, I won't say that, man. Otherwise, you'll ask me to go out. All right? I don't want to be. Yeah, okay. I can start, that's all.
Okay.
Yeah, Dr. Secret. In good, how do we say that? As good, not hypocrite, but as good Hippocrate.
Hippocrate.
Now, let me make it quite clear that there is a vast difference, and an orthoptist, notwithstanding that he has to acquire knowledge in relation to brain anatomy, but he's also part and parcel of a team run diligently by an ophthalmologist. And they work in hospital, and it's a service delivered, and it has to be delivered in it as a team and with a team spirit. And this is what an orthoptist does. He makes early diagnosis in children, does not only prescribe glasses to be worn, but he has more depth, as I say, scale and scope. Is it lazy eye? Can the blurred or double vision be corrected with an eye patch or glasses? If not, will minor surgery do? But there's more to amblyopia or strabismus. Now, I will also refer to come back to section 7.7. You know, when I assess the Vet Council, you know the problems we are having? It's a mirror image of the problem being encountered in relation to the Optical Council. It's lock, stock, and barrel, and they prevent good qualified vets to be registered. And I have raised the issue, I have flagged the issue, I have flogged it. But it's time for us now to bring in the necessary amendment as a responsible government. And we're not going to retreat, no surrender. And I congratulate my good friend, Honorable Minister, because he has not retreated, no surrender, under the able leadership of the Prime Minister. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes.
Madam Speaker,
Honorable.
to start with, I would like to thank all my colleagues, members of Parliament, to have taken part in this debate. And now the House will realize the reason why we have brought this bill. On the contrary, we have been too late. And I know the sufferings that many of our own children have undergone. They have been sitting there for the past so many years without getting the right to work in those optical shops. You know, throughout the island, we have got optical shops are mushrooming everywhere. But the right to work in those shops are met only for a handful few. They are enjoying the luxuries of life, others are lacking the basic necessities of life. And that, as a responsible government, we couldn't have accepted it. The leader of the opposition, in the beginning, he referred to the statement that I had made that this is unstatutory. The act as it is unstatutory because there are three opticians appointed who form part of the council, and I had mentioned that they are illegal. It's not legal because they are not officials. And then I have to correct it over again and maintain that they are not officers because they are working on a part-time basis. And according to the Attorney General's office advice, they are not officials, and that is the reason why I had maintained that from the very beginning, this act itself was illegal, and I'm going to maintain it. I would like to refer to the speech made by our friend Honorable Utim that was on the Optical Council bill in July 2021. I get the feeling that I have to congratulate him because he was foresighted at that time. He was wise enough to have mentioned a few things which we have seen. I am quoting him. While participating in the debates for the Optical Council Bill 2021, he stated, there is one aspect of the bill which has not been dealt with by the then Minister of Health and Wellness, and it is the establishment of a monopoly for local opticians when it comes to selling spectacles and optical appliances. This bill is creating a monopoly. As from the day the bill is passed, only a registered local optician will be able to sell spectacles and contact lenses in the country. Honorable Tim further denounced the fact that the main object of the Optical Council Bill was to give opticians exclusive right to sell spectacles and contact lenses. He also termed this as a lobby from a small group. The latter brought proceedings against 12 companies seeking an order from the court preventing them from selling spectacles and lenses. But on the day of the hearing, they withdrew the case. He further emphasized that the need to allow competition in this sector is not just to drive down prices, it is also to do with protecting young opticians who do not have the financial means to invest in equipment, to invest in stock of branded glasses. I thank him for that. He was farsighted enough, and he struck the nail rightly. Madam Speaker, it is necessary for me to address certain arguments that have been put forward regarding this bill. The true intent of this bill is to modernize and rebalance the regulatory framework governing the optical profession in our country. We have to correct the structural weaknesses that have emerged under the current system, including excessive gatekeeping, lack of transparency, and regulatory capture, as my friends have already mentioned. This reform ensures that the Optical Council operates in the public interest, strengthens governance, broadens representations, and aligns the regulatory framework with contemporary healthcare systems where patient protection, not professional control, is paramount. Let me state clearly, many of the arguments reflect a desire to preserve entrenched interest rather than to advance patient care or modern regulation. Let me also remind the House that the leader of the opposition, who was in government in 2021, has a significant responsibility in ushering through the House a bill which turned out to be illegal and which gave rise to gross unfairness and injustices. Regarding examinations, Madam Speaker, this reform was not taken lightly. It is a deliberate and necessary correction of a system that has become fundamentally flawed, unfair, and out of step with modern regulatory practice. Let me remind the House that according to the Optical Council Act of 2021, examinations were supposed to be held, as my friend Honorable Bulel mentioned, at least yearly. To be held at least yearly. Members of the Council, they acted illegally, and only 2 examinations were held. And in 6 years' time, we got only 16 who were qualified as opticians, out of hundreds of them who are still roaming around. Let me now delve more deeply in issues related to these examinations. The existing examination process, as my friends have already mentioned, raised serious concerns regarding fairness and transparency. As the members of the Council were involved, as you have heard, in determining examiners and those responsible for marking. So they were marking, they were correcting, they were doing everything. It was their business. And such an arrangement creates an inherent conflict of interest and undermines confidence and integrity. And that is the reason that they left no stone unturned to see to it that this bill doesn't pass in this House. Secondly, while the Mauritius exam syndicate was involved, but it was limited to only administrative oversight. It didn't provide independent technical validation of the content, standard setting or marking. Therefore, the core academic and professional integrity of the examination remained within the control of the very body being regulated, which cannot be acceptable. Madam Speaker, thirdly, opticians fall within the broader category of allied health professionals. And it is important to note that under the Allied Health Professional Council, there are no such pre-registration examination. Competency is ensured through recognized qualifications and regulatory oversight, not through potentially exclusionary examination. And when we speak of allied professionals, we have got, in our country, there are 6 clusters of allied health professionals in my ministry. And they do not undergo any examination. I'm going to name a few of them. For example, occupational therapists, orthopedic technicians, physiotherapists, podiatrists, psychopodists, sports therapists, audiologists, speech and language therapists, dietitian, nutritionist, psychologist, clinical psychologist, psychotherapist, psychomototherapist, chiropractor, osteopath, clinical scientist, medical imaging technologist, medical laboratory technologist. They do not participate in examination. They are doing very well, but they are controlled by the Allied Professional Council. Fourthly, historically, opticians were registered earlier under the Optical Registration Board when no examination existed, and that stayed for for the past 60 years. That was the case, and there was no evidence that the system compromised standards or patient safety. The introduction of examination did not demonstrably improve outcomes, but instead introduced barriers and controversy. Fifthly, and most strikingly, the same examination, this is very funny, on the same examination was required for opticians and optometrists, despite the clear difference in their training and scope of practice. So there is a set of papers, which is prepared, and both of them, either the opticians or optometrists, they have to take part in the same. It appears as if those who are cardiac surgeon, those who are cardiac, others who are skin specialists, some others who are surgeons, all of them have to take part in the same examination. So, Madam Speaker, this is not standardization, it's a miscalculation and frankly ludicrous to subject two fundamentally different professions to an identical assessment. Sixthly, internationally, countries like India and France, both key partners in the training of our health professionals, they do not require such examination for registration. They rely on accredited qualification and structured regulatory systems. Mauritius is aligning itself with these practical and established models. Seventh, the possibility of using an independent external examination body was indeed considered. However, this raises significant practical challenges. There are clear cost implications both for the state and the candidates. Furthermore, given that countries like India and France do not operate such examination system, there is no obvious partner institution readily available to provide such services. Madam Speaker, one must also consider the practical complexity of arranging such examinations. Would we need to engage separate external bodies for opticians, for optometrists and orthoptists? This would introduce fragmentation, increase cost, administrative inefficiency without clear benefit. This reform is about removing an opaque, inconsistent and unjustified barrier and replacing it with a system grounded in recognized qualification, fairness and modern regulatory principles. Regulations must ensure competence, not create artificial hurdles. This amendment restored credibility, coherence and fairness to the system. We have heard claims that removing examinations will lower standards. We have heard about it, but this is not correct. As I have just mentioned, there are countries, they have got well-established optical sectors. They don't rely on standalone licensing examination imposed by regulatory bodies. Rather, we have to rely on accredited qualification, structured training, and institutional oversight. Mauritius, we are not lowering our standards. We are aligning with global best practices. When registration was carried out under Optical Registration Board, we didn't encounter any problem with quality of care or patient safety. Currently, as I have just mentioned, we have got a number of allied health professionals who are doing very well without undergoing those examinations, but they are being controlled by the professional bodies. As far as the composition of the council is concerned, I heard the leader of the opposition, and he drew our attention to one point that there is an attempt for us in order to monopolize the council. But previously, out of 15 members, 6 were from the private sector and 9 were from the government. That has been the case till now. But in the new one, we have got 13 members, 6 from the private sector and 7 from the government. But in all or whatever council that we have, in any board, it's always the government which has got at least an advantage over the others. If you're not going to maintain it, then we are doomed. They will do whatever they feel like. So out of 13 members, if we have got 6 they have got 6, and we have got 7. And 7 includes representative of the Prime Minister's Office, Ministry of Finance, Attorney General's Office, my ministry, plus 2 independent members, as has been the case always. So I don't find anything wrong in that. So let us be frank and we stop deceit. This bill further introduces broader representation, stronger accountability, and alignment with national health priorities. A regulator exists to protect the public, not to function as a closed circle of practitioners. And it has been suggested that we are introducing, that the government is trying to have its will upon them, but that is not true. This is really misleading. We have always worked in this way, and what this bill does is clarify and rationalize representation. We are not introducing any new. As far as the definition of optometry is concerned, the leader of the opposition mentioned about it, but this is nonsensical because the definition is very well spelled out in the Act. Under the previous framework, opticians and optometrists were required to take, I mentioned, the same examination despite having fundamentally different levels of training and clinical responsibility. This created a situation where unequal roles were treated as equivalent, which is neither logical nor safe. An optician is primarily a technical professional involved in dispensing and fitting optical devices, whereas an optometrist is a clinically trained practitioner capable of assessing vision and detecting eye disease. To subject both of them to the same assessment standard is not standardization, it's miscalculation. Madam Speaker, the amendment corrects this by recognizing that different competencies require appropriately differentiated pathways of assessment and regulation. This strengthens, not weakens, professional standard. It ensures that patients clearly understand who is providing their care. Practitioners are assessed according to the actual scope of practice. Regulatory system reflects real-world clinical distinctions. And as far as creating division, this amendment restores coherence, protect patient safety, and align the system with sound regulatory principles. Madam Speaker, eye care today is delivered through a multidisciplinary model. Orthoptists play a critical role in diagnosing and managing visual disorders, particularly in children and neurological conditions. Bringing them under the council ensures uniform standards of care, proper accountability, and enhanced patient safety. This is a necessary step towards an integrated and modern eye care system. In any modern health care system, multidisciplinary oversight is essential. The presence of an ophthalmologist strengthens clinical governance, patient safety, and integration across services. To oppose this is to oppose progress in health care delivery. Madam Speaker, the removal of a rigid statutory definition of the practice of optometry is a deliberate and well-founded decision grounded in sound legislative principle. Firstly, healthcare practice, whether in optometry or medicine, is not static. It evolves continuously with advances in technology, new diagnostic tools, changing models of care. To fix a detailed definition in primary legislation is to freeze a dynamic profession in time, rendering the law quickly outdated. Parallel with practice of medicine, Madam Speaker, we do not define the practice of medicine in rigid, exhaustive terms within legislation. We do not attempt to list every diagnostic act, every procedure, every evolving intervention. Instead, the law recognizes the profession broadly and trusts regulatory bodies to define scope of practice, standards, and competencies. The same principle applies here. By removing a fixed definition, the bill avoids legislative rigidity, empowers regulatory body, and ensures relevance over time. Addressing concerns of ambiguity, Madam Speaker, this doesn't create a vacuum. The scope of practice will be clearly defined through regulations, guidelines, and professional standards linked to training and competence, subject to regulatory oversight and discipline. This is a controlled flexibility, not uncertainty. Regulations to define who is qualified and accountable, not attempt to exhaustively define every act they may perform. Madam Speaker, just as we do not confine the practice of medicine within rigid statutory wording, we should not constrain optometry. A modern law must enable a profession to evolve, not trap it in definition that will be obsolete tomorrow. Madam Speaker, it is both surprising and deeply concerning that certain members of the Optical Council appear not to understand the most basic function of the very body on which they sit. The Optical Council is not mandated to regulate optical shop. Its role is to regulate professionals, not commercial enterprises. To suggest otherwise reflects either a profound misunderstanding of the law or a deliberate attempt to blur responsibilities for convenience. Regulations of optical shop fall squarely within the scope of other appropriate legislation, and this is being looked into. What we are doing through this reform is restoring clarity, professional regulation where it belongs, and institutional and commercial regulation where it must be exercised. Let us be clear, confusing the roles does not protect patients, it weakens oversight. This bill corrects that. The real issue, resistance to change, Madam Speaker, a clear pattern emerges from the criticism we have heard. Every reform is portrayed as a threat. Reform of entry is a threat. Reform of governance is a threat. Reform of oversight is a threat. But what is never acknowledged is a risk of doing nothing. A system that restricts entry, lacks transparency, and resists evolution is itself the greatest threat to patient care. While summing up, I would say that this bill is not about weakening the profession. It is about strengthening the system. It is about ensuring that regulation serves the patient, the public interest, and the future of health care. Today we are with this bill, and most probably tomorrow we will come with a bill. We have to look at the medical council as well, because we have got multiplicity of problems in medical council, madam. Those who resist reform must ask themselves, are they defending standards or defending control? This government will always stand for patience over privilege, for transparency over opacity, for progress over stagnation. I therefore commend this bill to the House.
Yes, and it's seconded by Honourable Minister for Agriculture. The question is that the Optical Council Amendment Bill number 1 of 2026 be read a second time. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
At this stage. Okay. Clause 1, short title. Clause 2, interpretation. Clause 3, Section 2 of Principal Act amended. Clause 4, Section 4 of Principal Act amended. Clause 5, Section 5 of Principal Act amended. Clause 6, Section 6 of Principal Act amended. Clause 7, Section 7 of Principal Act amended. Clause 8, Section 8 of Principal Act amended. Clause 9, Section 9 of Principal Act amended. Clause 10, Section 12 of Principal Act amended. Clause 11, Part 4 of Principal Act amended. Clause 12, Section 21 of Principal Act amended. Clause 13, Section 22 of Principal Act amended. Clause 14, Section 24 of Principal Act amended. Clause 15, Section 24 of Principal Act amended. Clause 16, Section 25 of Principal Act amended. Clause 17, Section 26 of Principal Act amended.
The question is that clauses 1 to 17 stand part of the bill. Those in favour say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 18, Section 27 of Principal Act amended. Clause 19, Section 28 of Principal Act amended. Clause 20, Section 29 of Principal Act amended. Clause 21, Section 30 of Principal Act amended. Clause 22, Section 31 of Principal Act amended. Clause 23, Section 32 of Principal Act amended. Clause 24, Section 41 of Principal Act amended. Clause 25, Section 42 of Principal Act amended. Clause 26, first schedule to Principal Act repealed and replaced. Clause 27, second schedule to Principal Act amended. Clause 28, third schedule to Principal Act repealed and replaced. Clause 29, commencements.
The question is that clauses 18 to 29 stand part of the bill. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
First schedule.
Then the question is that the first schedule stands part of the bill. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Second schedule.
Question is that the second schedule stands part of the bill. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Title and enacting clause.
Question is that the title and enacting clause stand part of the bill. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The question is that I do report to the House that the Optical Council Amendment Bill number 1 of 2026 has passed the committee stage without amendment. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Thank you. May you resume your seats? Honourable members, I have to report to the House that the Optical Council Amendment Bill number 1 of 2026 has passed the committee stage without amendments.
Third reading.
Madam Speaker, I move that the Optical Council Amendment Bill number 1 of 2026 be passed its third time, read its third time and passed.
Yes. Dr. Bulel, you second? Yes. The question is that the Optical Council Amendment Bill number 1 of 2026 be read the third time and passed. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move for the adjournment of the House to Tuesday, the 31st of March at 11:30 a.m.
The House stands adjourned. That is all.